What's up everyone, it's Bluebear here, and today I will be going over my Urza Lord High Artificer deck. Since I don't need 2 mono blue decks to complete the 32 deck challenge, this may replace Talrand, and I may cannibalize it to help finish other decks that may need some of the cards. It all depends on what I do for the rest of the 32 decks. If you don't know what Urza does, then you may need to crawl out from under your rock, because who doesn't know what he does? I'm just kidding of course, so let me tell you all about him. Urza is a 4 mana, 1/4 legendary human artificer with the following 3 abilities. First, when he enters play, you create a 0/0 colorless construct artifact creature token that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. The second ability allows you to tap an untapped artifact you control to add a blue mana to your mana pool, and the third ability lets you pay 5 generic mana to shuffle your library, then exile the top card, and until end of turn, you may play that card without paying its mana cost. So, from creating a token that can get quite large, to making all of your artifacts become mana rocks, to letting you play some really expensive spells for a fraction of the cost, it's easy to see why Urza is a top 50 commander over the last 2 years. I've been working on getting the pieces for this build since he was spoiled, but it hasn't been easy. I decided to go full on Stax/combo for the theme, but I did not fully optimize it as I wanted it to be a little weaker to make it a tad more fair to play against. I like my friends and I don't want them all rage quitting or flipping the table on me. While I'm still working on acquiring pieces for the build, what I'm about to show you works really well as it is. So without further ado, here is my current Urza Lord High Artificer Stax/combo build. So I'll start with the lands like I like to do with my videos. I start off with Manamo School at Water's Edge. It has some good shenanigans with Emery, which is in the deck as well, and I'll show you that later. It comes into play untapped and taps out of blue, so it doesn't hurt me in any way, shape, or form to have it in here. Seat of the Synod is an artifact deck, so why not? Same thing with Darksteel Citadel, at least it's indestructible. I got Urzatron in here, which is Urza's Mine, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Tower, and assembling it is not that likely in Commander. However, I am using Urza, so it may be more likely because I can go ahead and search for things. Well, not search. I can flip things over randomly, and maybe I'll just assemble it that way. Ancient Tomb, because it is good ramp. Hurts a little bit. Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, same thing, only it's a little slower than Ancient Tomb. At least it doesn't hurt, though. Academy Ruins, because I want to be able to get as much stuff from my graveyard back as possible, so it's actually an auto-include here. Reliquary Tower, because my hand size will matter at some point, so I want to be able to keep all my cards. Strip Mine, because by now you should know that I do like to use at least 1 land destruction land in each of my decks. This is the best one out there. Maze of Ith is anti-Voltron, so if somebody's got a Voltron deck, I can at least stop the Voltron from coming in. Fabled Passage, because I have 2 fetch lands in here. However, they're not the OG Zendikar ones. I have Fabled Passage, and then I have Prismatic Vista because it's a monocolor deck. And then the rest is just basically islands. I chose these because I traded for these, for this deck specifically. I don't have a full boat of them. I do have some originals and the car full arts in here. None of them are foil, but eventually they will be. The ramp I've chosen is going to be all mana rocks, naturally, because this is an artifact deck. I start off with Jeweled Amulet, and Jeweled Amulet is a weird one. You can only use it every other turn for mana, but with Urza out, it does become a Mox Sapphire. Everflowing Chalice, it's 0 to cast, has multi-kicker, and it can tap to add more than 1 mana, or it can be a Mox Sapphire with Urza out. Lotus Petal is a great card. It's 0 to cast, comes into play untapped. You can tap and sack it to add a mana of any color. And again, with Urza out, you know the deal. It's a Mox Sapphire. Actual Moxes, we got Mox Amber. It's not as useful as the other ones because it needs something like Urza to be out, and Urza already makes it something like a Mox Sapphire. But there are other legendaries in here that can make it useful, so it'll work. I've used it a couple times. It works very well. Mox Opal, Metalcraft, and then obviously it's a 0 to cast artifact. Chrome Mox can add a mana of any color, which doesn't matter because I'm just mono blue here. Mox Diamond, you have to discard a land card from your hand or you have to sacrifice it, but it's the most expensive either card or at least most expensive mana rock in the deck. Second most expensive is probably this one, Mana Crypt. It's the full art one I got from Double Masters. I pulled this. It's nice and quick. Soul Ring, because obviously that's a no-brainer. Expedition Map, I wanted to be able to go search for any land I need, specifically like an Academy of Ruins, if I want to get artifacts back, so this goes and searches for a land card, not just a basic land. Journeyer's Kite is an odd inclusion for some people. I really like this card. It helps me thin my deck out of land cards because especially with Urza and his last ability of being able to pull cards from your deck and you'll be able to play them, if you pull double lands, you can't play them. So the more lands I can get out of the deck, the better. And it's a monocolor deck, so it's going to be a lot of basics. Burnished Heart may come out, but for now it's in. It's 3 to cast, it's a 2/2. You can sack it to go get 2 lands. Again, it pulls more lands out. And Solemn Simulacrum, or Sadbot, it's a 2/2 for 4 that lets you go search for a land and put it into play, and then when it dies, you can draw a card. And because I can get stuff back with something like Academy Ruins or other things, you can do it repeatedly. So it was a nice inclusion. Each creature that I chose to put in here has a purpose. Some of them may be coming out, though. So we'll start with Walking Ballista. It's actually just good utility. You can actually make infinite mana in this deck, so Walking Ballista can be a win con. Spellskite protects Urza. You can actually change targets to it instead of having something target Urza. So I like being able to get it back so that I can do it over and over again so I can keep protecting Urza. Scarecrow, another thing that can return stuff back from my graveyard. This one actually returns it to the battlefield, and you can sacrifice them if you want to draw a card. Emery, what I was talking about earlier with Minamo, it's a 3 to cast legendary 1/2. It costs 1 less for each artifact, so if I can't get it into play for 1 blue, I'm doing something wrong. And then you have to mill 4 cards, but you can tap Emery and choose an artifact in your graveyard and cast it that turn. And Minamo will make it so you can do it over and over at least twice, sometimes more depending on what's going on. So I like both of those in here. It's good synergy. Master Transmuter, it's a 4 to cast 1/2. I can pay a blue and tap it to return an artifact I control to my hand, and then I may put an artifact from my hand onto the battlefield. And I have a lot of token creation here, so returning an artifact token to my hand and putting in something that's really nasty, always beneficial. Phyrexian Metamorph, I liked the copy part. I put a lot of copy spells in here. This is the first one, so it comes into play. You can choose an artifact or a creature on the battlefield, not just yours, and then it'll become a copy. And you never know, some people might be playing something more expensive or that you didn't think about. You can copy it, and you'll have a copy yourself. Padim protects your artifacts. It gives them hexproof, and then you can draw a card if you have the highest mana value artifact on the board, which in this deck I better. Spark Double, another one that copies, at least this one copies planeswalkers and creatures. If it copies a creature, it comes into play with an additional +1/+1 counter, and if it copies a planeswalker, it gets an additional loyalty counter. There are plenty of things that I can copy with this. Vidalcan Archmage, it's a draw engine. It's 4 to cast 0/2 that whenever I cast an artifact spell, I draw a card. Pretty simple. Wormcoil Engine may come out. This is a personal choice for me. I actually like this card a lot. It's a 6 to cast 6/6 with Death Touch and Lifelink, and then when it dies, you split it for the most part. You create 2 3/3 tokens. One has Death Touch, one has Lifelink. Again, I like it personally, and I wanted to play it. I had a special edition foil one, so I wanted to play it. However, it may be coming out. Platinum Imperium, it's an 8 to cast 8/8 that makes it so my life total can't change, so it's good protection. And the thing that Master Transmuter could be devastating with is Blightsteel Colossus. It's a 12 to cast 11/11, trampling, infect, indestructible, that when it goes to the graveyard from anywhere, you can shuffle back into your library. The instants and sorceries of this deck aren't all that great. They could use some improvement. The first one I'm going to show you is probably going to come out. It's Archmage's Charm. It's 3 to cast for an instant. It's 3 blue. You counter a spell, or you have target player draw 2 cards, or you can gain control of target non-land permanent with a converted mana cost or mana value now of 1. I have it in here because I thought it would be funny to steal Soul Rings, but other than that, it's okay, so it may come out. War of Invention, 3 blue and X, goes with Improvise, so your artifacts can help pay for the X cost. And then you can search your library for an artifact with a mana value of X or less and put it onto the battlefield. And I actually chose this over a couple other ones because I like it being able to go into the battlefield. I want things to not just go to my hand, I want them in play. Blue Sun Zenith, 3 blue and X, draw X cards. Actually, target player draws X cards. And then I can shuffle it in so I can do it over and over if I keep drawing it. Paradoxical Outcome is actually kind of cool. It's 4 to cast. I return any number of non-land, non-token permanents that I control to my hand, and then I draw a card for each card returned to your hand. So the reason why I like this is I have a lot of 0 to cast artifacts in here, so it hurts me in no way if I return a lot of 0 to cast stuff to my hand, because I can just cast them again, and then I draw that many cards. So it's actually quite good. I've used it a couple times to good effect. All is dust because this is a heavy artifact deck. There are a lot of blue cards in here, but the most important parts are artifacts. So this is 7 to cast, and each player must sacrifice all all colored permanents to that they control. Sacrifice is great because that means that I don't have to worry about targeting, and I don't have to worry about indestructible. And Expropriate was actually just a fun choice for me. It's 9 to cast, and it has Council's Dilemma, so it starts a vote, and each player must vote for either time or money. And for each vote that is time, I take an extra turn, so obviously that's what I'm going to choose. And then each opponent who chooses, or any player who chooses money, I get to choose something of theirs and take it. People don't really like people stealing their shit, so for me, I feel like this is going to give me a lot of extra turns. So the artifacts of this deck are the Heart and Soul. What isn't actually useful at a specific time with Urza out becomes a Mox Sapphire, so keep that in mind. Mistress Baba is the first one I'm going to mention about Mox Sapphire because it's 0 to cast, and then it just taps and you sacrifice it to look at the top card of a player's library and then draw a card at the beginning of the next upkeep. And if you can get this back, you can keep doing that so you can draw repeatedly. Skull Clamp, I said earlier there's going to be a lot of token creation in here as well. Some of the infinite combos deal with that, so being able to draw cards with Skull Clamp, that's usually how it works. You know, you give a 1/1 token -1 and with the Skull Clamp, and it dies, and it goes to your graveyard naturally, because tokens go to the graveyard now, and then they cease to exist. And then you draw 2 cards, so this can draw me in a bunch of cards pretty easily. Shadow Spear may come out. It's 1 to cast. It's an equipment that you equip for 2. It gives the creature +1/+1 trample and lifelink, which doesn't really do a whole lot in this deck for me. I did it so that I can make so that my opponents can't have hexproof or indestructible on their stuff. However, that hasn't really come up much, so it may come out. Elixir of Immortality is a personal choice here. I don't think a lot of people play it. I did because I have a deck called Death by Thopter that I like to fashion around a lot, and this is the heart and soul of that deck, so I wanted to try it in here. It's 1 to cast, it's 2 tap, and you gain 5 life, which is always useful in a game of Commander. Sometimes you need more life. And then you shuffle it and your graveyard back into your library. Retrofitter Foundry, it's a 1 to cast artifact that needs a reprint badly. It has self-untap, so for 3 you can untap it, and then it has 3 abilities that create tokens. One of them you create a 1/1 just servo token, one of them you sacrifice a servo to create a Thopter token that flies, and then you can also sacrifice a Thopter to create a 4/4 artifact token creature. Now, the cool thing here is that the amount of actual Thopters I can create outside of this card are great, so I can start sacrificing those 1/1 flyers to make 4/4 beastly tokens. So it was a pretty good inclusion. I've actually used it to good effect. Scroll Rack, it's the precursor to, I guess, what would be Sensei's Divining Top. It helps give you cards in your hand that were deeper in your deck and set up your next couple draws. So it's 2 to cast, you pay 1 and tap it, you choose any number of cards in your hand, you put them on top of your library, or you draw that many cards, or actually, it's not really a draw, you put that many cards from the top of your library into your hand, and then you take the cards that you put aside, and you put them on top in any order you want, so you can set up your next draws later. Lightning Greaves is simply just to protect Urza. It's one of the best ones possible. Howling Mine, this and the next 2 cards after it will have a similarity. They don't work if they're tapped, and because Urza taps things, you can shut them off for your opponent and turn them on for you. So Howling Mine lets people draw an extra card during their draw step. You can turn it off for your opponents. Winter Orb makes it so that people can only untap 1 land. This is where the Stax comes in. You can turn it off for you and turn it on only for your opponents. And the same thing with Winter Orb, where players can only can't untap more than 2 permanents during their untap phases. And again, this must be untapped for it to work. That's the new wording. So you can turn it off for you. You keep it untapped during all of your opponent's turns, and at the end of the opponent that goes before you goes, you tap it for mana before you untap. Staff of Domination, this is actually, in my opinion, the best mana sink in the game. 30 cast, and it has 5 abilities. It untaps itself for 1, so you can use it repeatedly. You can gain life, you can untap a creature, you can tap a creature, or you can draw a card. And with infinite mana, you can do any one of those infinitely. Mirage Mirror, another card that copies, only copies for a turn. So it's 3 to cast, it comes in play, and you can pay 2 to have it become a copy of an artifact, a creature, or an enchantment, or a land. And it doesn't have to be just yours, it could be one of your opponents. Oblivion Stone is a candidate for coming out. This deck was made when Double Masters first came out, and I really wanted to use an Oblivion Stone for the first time, and I pulled a foil one, so why not? But it's supposed to be a board wipe, but it's very slow, and I have other ways that I think that would work better now. So I'm going to probably pull this out, and I'm probably going to replace it with something else eventually. Trading Post, I wish this had its own untap ability, like the Staff of Domination and the Thopter Foundry, or is that what that's called? Whatever it is, the Thopter one. So it can do 4 things. The only thing that really matters on this is the last 2. You can discard a card to gain 4 life. Okay, great. You can pay a life to create a goat, which I don't care about. It's the next 2. You can sacrifice a creature to return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. With all the tokens I can sacrifice, this could be important. Or you can sacrifice an artifact to draw a card. It's one of the very few sack outlets for artifacts if you want to do that. And with the amount of tokens that I can create, they're all artifact tokens, so I will be able to draw cards off of this as well. Again, I wish it had its own self-untap ability. Unwinding Clock, naturally this is an auto-include here. It untaps all artifacts you control during each other player's untap step. And then this card is called Vidalcan Orrery. It's 4 to cast, and the English version, I'll impose it up here for you so you can see the English version, but it basically just states that you can cast spells as if though they had flash, so I can do stuff on my opponent's turns. And then the last artifact is Darksteel Forge. It's 9 to cast and gives all my artifacts indestructible. So if I do switch out the Oblivion Stone for something like, I don't know, Nevinyrral's Disc, I can over and over just destroy everything on the board, and nothing of mine goes away because they all have indestructible. As far as the enchantments go, there's only 2. It wasn't a big section, but what is here is good. I have Copy Artifact because, again, I wanted to copy things on the board. Some of my own, sometimes somebody else's, who knows. But it's really good utility. And then a Wincon, Mechanized Production. It's a 4 to cast aura enchantment that you enchant an artifact that you control. And then at the beginning of your upkeep, I will create a token that's a copy of the enchanted artifact. And then if I control 8 or more, I win the game. So I did this because I just wanted a wins more kind of condition and another way to win. It's cheesy, but it works. Before I get into the combos, I'm going to show you the Planeswalkers. We're going to start off with Teferi, Master of Time. And I'm not going to explain everything about them. I'm going to tell you why I chose them. So this guy can actually activate on everybody's turn. It can draw cards, and then you have to discard a card so it digs. I can phase out a opponent's commander, which can shut off a lot of decks, and then it can give me extra turns. So this was a great inclusion here. I don't have every single Planeswalker I want, but the ones I do have, I did want. So next up is Tezzeret, the Seeker. It's a 5 to cast, comes into play with 4 counters. The first ability is okay to untap 2 artifacts because obviously that's what this deck wants to do. It's the middle ability that I wanted the most. So I can search my library for an artifact with a mana value of X or less and put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. And it's a -X, so right off the bat, when he comes into play, the first thing I always do if I don't have him in play is I put him into play, and then I go search for a card that's part of a combo, and I'll show you that card in a little bit. The last ability, which is, I guess, technically the ultimate, but it's not really, it makes all your artifacts become 5/5 artifact creature tokens, or artifact creatures. So the 1/1 Thopters that I was talking about earlier are now 5/5s, and that could be a way to win. It says at Artifice Master, it's 5 to cast, and comes into play with 5 loyalty counters, and then it creates Thopter tokens, which I want. It helps me draw cards. And then the last one, which is actually more devastating than you think, the ultimate lets you go and search your library for a permanent card and put it onto the battlefield every turn. That's pretty devastating for your opponent. Ugin the Ineffable, I had this in here because it allows me to cast colorless spells, which is artifacts, for 2 less, so I can now do anything that's 0, 1, 2, or 3 mana value free. So that's why I have that in here. It lets me draw cards, it puts tokens into play and all that stuff, but it also has removal. It can destroy permanents that are 1 or more colors, so it's actually not bad all around. And then, of course, I think this is the king of all Planeswalkers, even to this day, and people have opinions. They might tell me I'm wrong, but that's my opinion. It's 8 to cast, comes into play with 7 counters, it deals damage. It actually makes people get rid of things, so it can exile. So exile gets around the indestructible problem, so they have to exile permanents with a mana value of X or less, that's 1 or more colors. So that's pretty good. And it starts at 7 loyalty, so you can do anything up to 7. That could really wipe an entire board. Actually, that can wipe everybody's board. And then its ultimate is actually really cool. So at -10, you get to gain 7 life, draw 7 cards, and then put 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. It does not count as cast, so keep that in mind for things like the guy that lets you draw cards when I cast artifacts. It doesn't work that way. But as far as Planeswalkers go, in my opinion, best one out there. In the final section of this video, I will cover the combos and win cons. This deck has quite a few, so I'll explain them as best as I can in as short of a time as I can. The first combo I have is a lockdown combo and uses Mycosynth Lattice and Karn the Great Creator, and here's how it works. Karn is a Planeswalker that has a static ability where all activated abilities of artifacts your opponents control can't be activated. The rest of what Karn says doesn't matter for the purposes of both the combo and the deck as a whole. It's only here to help create the lock. Mycosynth Lattice states that all permanents, including your opponents, are artifacts in addition to their other types. What this means is that with these 2 out, your opponents now can't tap any lands, creatures, or rocks for mana, so unless they have all free spells, there isn't much they can do for the rest of the game. The second combo I included is a little more complicated because you have to know how to use the stack, but it creates infinite colorless mana if done right. This 2-card combo is Basalt Monolith and Rings of Brightheart. Basalt Monolith is 3 to cast, taps to add 3 colorless mana, and then has this ability that allows you to untap it at any time by paying 3 generic mana. Rings of Brightheart is an artifact that allows you to pay 2 generic mana to copy any activated ability. Since the Monolith's untap ability is an activated one, it can be exploited in the following way. Tap the Monolith to add 3 colorless mana. Spend that 3 to activate its own untap ability, putting it on the stack. Generate 2 mana from other sources to pay for the Ring's triggered ability, and copy the Monolith's untap ability, which puts another instance of it on the stack. Let one untap ability resolve, and tap the Monolith to add 3 colorless mana before the second untap ability on the stack resolves. Let the second untap ability resolve, then tap the Monolith again to add another 3 colorless mana for a total of 6 colorless mana floating in your pool. Because you now have 6 floating mana, you will use 3 of that mana to activate Basalt Monolith's untap ability, and 2 of the floating mana for Rings of Brightheart's activated ability instead of mana from another source. You will repeat steps 4 and 5 repeatedly, netting you 1 extra colorless mana each time you do it for a result of infinite colorless mana. I have many useful outlets for colorless mana that I've shown you, so winning at this point is just a matter of which outlet I have when this combo hits the table. Remember that Urza himself is also an outlet that can get everything I need to win if this combo hits the table before any of the other outlets do. The next few combos will involve any of the following cards that create artifact tokens: Sai, Master Thopterist, Mirrodin Besieged, and/or Efficient Construction. All 3 have an ability that states when you cast an artifact, create an artifact creature token of some sort, so keep that in mind as I go over the next few cards. Also, part of these combos can be Intruder Alarm, which states that whenever a creature enters play, everyone untaps all creatures that they control, which leads to all sorts of fun shenanigans since I am able to create so many tokens. So with all that said, the third combo I'm going to use uses Hullbreaker Horror. It states that whenever I cast a spell, I return a non-land permanent to its owner's hand. This is where all of those 0 to cast artifacts have the most benefit. With 1 0 to cast artifact in play and 1 in hand, you can keep looping them infinitely. With any of the cards that create tokens for casting artifacts on the field, this gives infinite creature tokens. If Intruder Alarm and Urza are also both on the field, now I can tap the 0 cost artifact and/or the token I just created for blue mana. Then, when the creature token enters play, all creatures untap, allowing me to tap them for mana again. So now I can create infinite tokens and make infinite mana to do with whatever I wish. The last combo I currently have in the deck uses Mystic Forge and Sensei's Divining Top. The Forge allows me to look at the top card of my library at any time and cast any artifacts or colorless non-land cards from the top. The top, or Sensei's Divining Top, is only one to cast and allows me to tap it to draw a card and put itself on top of my library. The Forge will allow me to cast the Divining Top from the top of my library as long as I have enough mana available to pay for its cost. When I combine this with any of the token creators and Urza, I can draw my entire library if I want. Then, if I add in the Intruder Alarm, it will make a lot of mana available to me, but only until I run out of cards, so this can get tricky if I'm not careful. Side note, this is the combo I search for the most because I find it more fun, interesting, and fair when playing with friends. The others are easier and honestly cheesier to pull off, so I tend to only use them if they happen naturally over the course of the game. As you can see, the last few combos are a mix of cards that all interact well with each other to create either infinite tokens, infinite mana, and/or infinite cast triggers in different ways that all can lead to different ways of winning. What makes these combos easier to pull off is Urza's third ability that lets you just get stuff from your library and cast them for free. Sure, it's random what you get, but that's why I included so many different combo pieces to help ensure that I can assemble at least one of them as quickly as possible. If you need any of this explained further, just ask in the comment section and I'll be more than happy to do so. And that, my friends, is my current Urza Lord High Artificer Stax combo build. While I've said in the past that Spellslinger is currently my favorite style to play, blue artifact decks were my first love when the game first started, so this deck, while not perfectly optimized, is one of my favorite decks to pilot. There's just so much it can do, it's never a dull moment. For me, anyway. So that wraps up this round of personal deck builds for a little bit. This deck did not add anything to my 32 deck challenge list, but the next time I showcase personal decks, all of them will. Currently in the works, I have 3 4-color decks and 3 2-color decks, but if you go by how long it took me to get these last few done, it may be a bit before I can do a video on them. So, until then, I actually have quite a few custom builds to show you over the next couple of months, including some pauper decks and of course some fun commanders. As always, thanks for watching, and while you're waiting for next week's new video to drop, go check out some of my other 32 deck challenge videos, or maybe even some budget commander builds. Have a great day, and
may the Schwartz be with you!